I'm James, and this is Action and Adventure Tips, the place where you, the content creator, can come and learn about all those little action and adventure tips that you want to write about, but aren't quite sure if you're going to get it right. I'm here to help you get it right. Today's discussion, we're going to be talking about cartridges. And I'm not talking ink cartridges, I'm talking about cartridges used in firearms. Now, most of you probably just call them bullets, but that's not really the case because the bullet is only one part of it. The casing is another part, and we'll get all into that. The first thing to understand is that the cartridge is made up of 4 separate components. This is a typical cartridge. It consists of the bullet, which is at the very tip here, the casing. There's a little thing inside the casing right here at the very end of it that is called a primer, and inside the casing is propellant, also known as gunpowder. Now, gunpowder has been around for hundreds of years. Matter of fact, it wasn't until about 1889 that we got away from using what is known now as black powder and started using what is called smokeless powder. Why is this important? Well, if you're using black powder, it's kind of hard to see after you fire off a shot. Why? Because there's a whole plume of smoke that comes out. Many of you have probably seen Civil War movies or reenactments where you can see that. If you've ever fired off firecrackers, that's black powder. Sometimes it's colored so that when the fireworks go up in the air, you have beautiful, colorful displays. So what separates gunpowder, modern propellant gunpowder that is, from black powder or cordite? Time, history. Up until about 1889, most gunpowder was actually made from saltpeter, charcoal, and sulfur, which we now refer to as black powder. And when you fired that gun or cannon off, it would emit a huge white cloud, and it would smell like sulfur because of the sulfur that was in it. Well, around 1889, smokeless powder was invented. Now, why would they invent smokeless powder? Well, it makes it harder to identify whoever's shooting from, and it's also a lot more clear after you fire than if you're shooting black powder. So you as the gunner can see your targets, which is a very important thing if you're actually trying to kill people from a distance, especially during wartime. So, cordite was actually used up until 1945. And this is probably why we have the use of the smell of cordite was in the air so common nowadays, because we still think of it back in the 1945 times when it was cordite. But now we use modern propellant or gunpowder, which is slightly different. It is smokeless, like cordite is, but it comes across with a very acrid smell. If you've ever been shooting, you know what gunpowder smells like. If you've ever lit off firecrackers, you know what black powder smells like. I don't know what cordite smells like because I've never smelled it. Anyhow, getting back into the whole issue of the other cartridges now. Cartridges are usually called bullets or rounds. Now, a round is a unit of measurement, so what you're really saying is how many cartridges you have, such as I've got a magazine with 20 cartridges. But you won't say 20 cartridges because, well, that takes a while to say. Instead, you'll say 20 rounds. Now, you can use rounds, cartridges, or bullets sort of interchangeably in dialogue, but never use it in the narrative. Be sure you understand the difference. The bullet is the part that comes out of the barrel. It's only a part of the cartridge. The cartridge is measured by how many units there are, rounds. So use that properly. Now, when we're also talking about cartridges, we want to talk about sizes. And there are 2 units of measurement here. You have the imperial system and the metric system. Guess what? The U.S. isn't the only one that is using the imperial system. Other countries still do when it comes to firearms, but we use it interchangeably. And when I'm talking imperial system, I'm talking about the diameter of things, the diameter of a bullet. Here's a typical bullet. This bullet is a .40 or 40 caliber, or as we call it, a 40 Smith & Wesson. That means that the diameter of the bullet, not the casing, just the bullet, is 0.40 inches in diameter. On the metric system, we'll have something like this, the 9mm bullet, which is 9 millimeters in diameter. You might have something like this. In this case, this is a 308, which means it is 0.308 inches in diameter, also known as 7.62 millimeter or 7.62 millimeter. We just say 7.62. And here's one in 5.56, or as we call it, 5.56. It is also approximately 0.22 inch in diameter, which is why some people will say, oh, the 5.56 using the AR-15 is the same as a 22 bullet. Yeah, it is a 22 bullet, but if you take a look at a comparison between the 22 bullet here and the 22 bullet here that some people are trying to compare them to, yeah, they are the same diameter, but as you can see, there is a considerably larger case with considerably more powder in it. More powder typically means more bang. More bang means the bigger things move faster. So, standard metric ammunition, you might have 40 caliber, 45 caliber, 38 caliber, 50 caliber or 50 BMG, that stands for Browning machine gun, and of course the ubiquitous 30 caliber, like the 30-06 or the 308. When we're looking at metric, most common calibers are like 9mm, 7.62 millimeter. What about measuring these things? I mean, okay, we've got the diameter, but how do you measure what it means when they say 5.56 by 45? So what that basically means is that the casing is 45 millimeters long with a 5.56 millimeter bullet ensconced in it. And in this case, let's say this is a 7.62 NATO, it would be 7.62 by 51 millimeters, so 51 millimeter casing with a bullet diameter of 7.62. Now, when you're talking 7.62, what are you really meaning? I mean, because there are a lot of 7.62s out there. There's the 7.62 NATO, which is 7.62 by 51 millimeter, and then you have two 7.62 Russians, the Kalashnikov or AK 7.62, which is 7.62 by 39, or the Moisun Gassant, and I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that right, which is 7.62 by 54 millimeters, so a longer casing than the NATO casing. So, casing will typically determine how much powder can be held, but then you have the bullet. It's how much does it weigh? Bullets and powder are both measured using grains as a unit of measurement, which is based on the old Roman grain of wheat. So basically 1 grain is the equivalent of about 7/1000ths of a pound. So when you're looking at a bullet, you may be looking at a 7.62, or correction, a 5.56 NATO round, which would typically be between 42 and 55 grains. A typical 7.62 NATO round would be about 150 grains. If you're hunting elk, you might use 185 grain because you want a heavier bullet. A little 22 like this, probably around 25 to 40 grains. Pretty small. They can still do some damage though. As a matter of fact, it's the preferred weapon of hitmen because you can actually put a suppressor on the pistol and it makes it really quiet as opposed to a suppressor on any other weapon, which still sounds loud. Now the bullets themselves come in several different types. What you've been seeing here a lot of is jacketed bullets. This is called full metal jacket, FMJ. This little 22 is not. This is just a lead bullet. That's it. Why would you put a jacket on a bullet? Well, number one, it prevents fouling of the barrel. You don't want a lot of lead stuck in the barrel. Copper is apparently easy to clean out. And you can have copper or aluminum jacketing on a bullet. For example, this is a 9mm jacketed hollow point. You'll notice that there's a hole in the center of it. Meanwhile, you've got the full metal jacket, 9mm, and then you have just a regular jacketed hollow point. The jacket being copper. Here's another type of hollow point. This is called a hydro shock. This is what a lot of police carried when I was a cop. There's a little tiny post inside here that basically allows it to expand scientifically. In other words, maximum expansion without the bullet fragmenting as much as possible. Some bullets are just semi-jacketed. You'll notice that the lead is exposed here with a little bit of a jacket around part of it. So bullets can either be solid or they can be hollow point. That's pretty much it for most bullets, although there are many other ones out there. Now, one of the things that is mentioned, you might see a lot of, is the designation NATO, N-A-T-O. NATO stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Any cartridge that has a NATO designation is one that is acceptable to all NATO members and is compatible between firearms. So when I hold up a 5.56 NATO round, that means any military in NATO has a firearm that's capable of shooting it, and they should all work properly the same. Same with 7.62 NATO. Actually, this is a 308. It's not a 7.62 NATO, but it's so similar that many people think that they are the same, and they are not. So other NATO designations are the 5.57 by 28 and probably 20 millimeter. By the way, 20 millimeter is pretty big. That goes into cannon territory. That's not handgun or firearm territory. That's big guns. The 30 millimeter, that's big stuff. So that's it. Just remember, firearm is composed of the bullet, the casing, the primer, and here's another little example of the primer. Here's the side that shows where when it strikes, it will ignite the powder. I don't know if you can see that too well. And then the powder. Okay, that's it about cartridges. Just remember, when you're using the discussion in dialogue, it's okay to interchangeably say bullets, rounds, or cartridges, but when you're in the narrative, the bullet comes out of the gun, the cartridge is the entire component, and the round is a unit of measurement to identify how many cartridges you have, because let's face it, saying cartridge over and over again is a difficult thing to do. Alright, I hope you liked the video. If you did, click that little like button, subscribe, looking for more subscribers, and stay safe out there. And don't forget to check out my website, jamespeet.com.